Lieutenant Mason Hale gripped his duffel bag tighter as the transport shuttle's engines hummed to life, carrying him toward what might be the most challenging assignment of his career. Through the viewport, the massive dreadnought Velcara's edge loomed like a metal leviathan against the star-speckled void, its alien architecture a stark reminder that he was no longer in familiar territory. "First time on a multi-species vessel?" asked Lieutenant Torres, a seasoned officer with kind eyes who'd taken pity on Mason's obvious nervousness during the journey. Mason nodded, swallowing hard. "Command says it's an honor, but honestly, I feel like I'm way out of my depth." The shuttle docked with a metallic clang that reverberated through the hull. As the airlock hissed open, Mason stepped into a corridor that buzzed with activity. Crew members of various species moved with practiced efficiency, some tall and graceful with crystalline skin, others compact and muscular with fur-covered faces. The air carried unfamiliar scents and the constant hum of translated conversations. "Welcome to organized chaos," Torres chuckled, leading him toward the main briefing room. "You'll get used to it. Just remember, respect the hierarchy, follow protocol, and whatever you do, don't cross Commander Vren." Mason's stomach clenched. He'd heard whispers about Commander Zalith Vren during his briefings, a legend among the Allied forces, known for her tactical brilliance and uncompromising leadership. Some called her the Iron Maiden of the Outer Rim, others simply referred to her as the Commander, with a mixture of reverence and fear. The briefing room doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing a space filled with officers from across the galaxy. But Mason's attention immediately focused on the figure at the head of the room. Commander Zalith Vren stood nearly 7 feet tall, her pale purple skin seeming to glow under the harsh lighting. Dark curly hair framed a face that was both beautiful and intimidating, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of deep space. Her uniform was immaculate, every line speaking of absolute authority. "Today's mission parameters are non-negotiable," she began, her voice carrying easily across the room despite its measured tone. "We will be conducting joint operations with the Terran Defense Force on Kepler 442b. The enemy has established a foothold there, and we will remove them." Mason tried to focus on the tactical displays, but found his gaze drawn repeatedly to the commander. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, fluid, predatory, completely in control. When her dark eyes swept across the room, he felt as though she could see straight through him, cataloging his fears and inadequacies with surgical precision. "Lieutenant Hale," her voice cut through his thoughts like a blade. Mason's heart hammered as every head in the room turned toward him. "Why yes, Commander. You will be assigned to Beta Team, working directly under Captain Corvash. Your technical expertise will be crucial for disabling their defense systems." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment that felt like an eternity. "Do not disappoint me." "No, ma'am. I won't." Something flickered in her expression, too quick to interpret, before she continued the briefing. Mason spent the remainder of the session trying to ignore the feeling that Commander Zalith Vren was watching him, evaluating him, for reasons he couldn't begin to understand. The crimson sand of Zirian Prime whipped around Mason's helmet as he crouched behind the wreckage of a crashed shuttle, his fingers flying across the portable hacking interface. The rebel stronghold loomed ahead, its energy shields crackling ominously in the alien twilight. "Hale, I need those defensive barriers down in 90 seconds, Captain Dex's voice crackled through the comm, the Centaurian officer's 4 arms gesticulating wildly as he coordinated the assault teams. "Working on it, sir," Mason replied, sweat beading on his forehead despite the suit's climate control. The encryption was more complex than anticipated, layers upon layers of security protocols that seemed to shift and adapt as he worked. Through the chaos of battle, Mason caught glimpses of Commander Zalith Vren leading the frontal assault. Even in the heat of combat, she moved with lethal precision, her pale purple skin almost luminescent against the red landscape. Her dark curls whipped in the artificial wind created by energy weapons fire, and her plasma rifle found its targets with devastating accuracy. "Shields are offline," Mason announced triumphantly as the barrier flickered and died. But his moment of victory was cut short. A glint of metal from a hidden sniper's perch caught his eye, the unmistakable barrel of a rail gun targeting Commander Vren as she advanced. The weapon's charging coils began to glow, and Mason's heart stopped. Without thinking, he abandoned his position and sprinted across the open ground. Commander, sniper. Time seemed to slow as Mason threw himself at Zalith, tackling her just as the rail gun discharged. The hypersonic projectile seared through the air where she'd been standing, and they both crashed hard against a boulder formation. Mason felt something pop in his shoulder, but adrenaline kept the pain at bay. For a moment, they lay entangled, her warm body pressed against his. Mason became intensely aware of her unique scent, like midnight storms and exotic flowers, and the way her chest rose and fell rapidly beneath her armor. When their eyes met, he saw something flicker in those dark depths that made his pulse race. "You're bleeding," she said softly, her voice gentler than he'd ever heard it. Mason looked down to see crimson spreading across his uniform where debris had torn through. "It's nothing serious. You risked your life for mine." Her hand moved to his face, her touch surprisingly tender. "Why? I couldn't let anything happen to you," Mason admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Something profound passed between them in that moment, an electric connection that neither could explain. Zalitha's expression grew intensely focused, as if she were seeing him for the first time. "We need to move," she said finally, but her voice carried a strange note, almost like reverence. The mission concluded successfully, but Mason noticed the changes immediately upon their return to the ship. Crew members stared at him with mixtures of awe and what looked suspiciously like sympathy. Lieutenant Garrett, his bunkmate, avoided eye contact entirely. "Did I do something wrong?" Mason asked during debriefing, but Captain Dex just shook his head gravely. "Not wrong, lad. But you've just triggered something that's going to change your life forever." Mason's hands trembled slightly as he stood outside Commander Vren's private quarters. The summons had arrived via official channels. "Lieutenant Hale, report to my quarters at 2000 hours for urgent consultation regarding Zirian Prime mission parameters." The formal tone did nothing to calm his nerves. He'd spent the last day replaying the rescue, wondering if he'd somehow violated protocol by tackling a superior officer, even to save her life. The doors slid open before he could announce himself, revealing quarters that took his breath away. The space was elegant yet functional, with flowing architectural lines that seemed almost organic. Bioluminescent panels cast a soft purple glow, and the walls were adorned with what appeared to be ceremonial weapons and artistic pieces from Zalitha's homeworld. Commander Vren stood near a massive viewport, still in her formal uniform but somehow seeming less intimidating than usual. When she turned to face him, Mason was struck by the vulnerability in her expression. "Please, sit," she said, gesturing to a chair that seemed designed for both their species' comfort. Mason perched on the edge, his military training keeping his posture rigid. "Commander, if my actions during the mission were inappropriate." "They were not inappropriate," she interrupted, then paused, seeming to struggle with her words. "They were consequential." She moved to her desk and activated a holographic display showing complex legal documents written in flowing alien script. "According to Galactic Treaty Code 7C, subsection 9, you have been designated as my legally eligible bondmate. Do you wish to contest this designation?" Mason's world tilted. "I'm sorry, what?" Zalitha's fingers traced through the holographic text as she explained. "In my culture, when an unmated individual saves the life of a noble caste member through an act of selfless heroism, ancient law considers this a sign of compatible spirit essence. The law automatically creates a potential life bond between the rescuer and the rescued." "That's..." Mason struggled to find words. "That's insane. I was just doing what anyone would do. That is precisely why the law exists." Her voice carried a note of sadness. "True heroism cannot be faked or coerced. When you threw yourself into danger to save me, you demonstrated the kind of instinctive valor that my people have valued for millennia." Mason ran his hands through his hair, trying to process the magnitude of what she was telling him. "But I barely know you. You're my commanding officer." There has to be a way to refuse. Zalitha's expression hardened slightly. Yes, you may contest the bond. However, doing so would be interpreted as a grave insult to my family lineage and could result in severe diplomatic consequences, including your potential expulsion from the alliance. The weight of her words settled over him like a suffocating blanket. Everything he'd worked for, his entire career, hanging in the balance because of one instinctive moment. How long do I have to decide? He asked quietly. 7 standard days. Zalith moved closer, and Mason caught that intoxicating scent again. But Mason, may I call you Mason? He nodded, unable to speak. While you consider your options, perhaps you should understand what this bond truly entails. My people do not form casual attachments. When we mate, it is for life. We share thoughts, emotions, instincts. The connection runs deeper than any human concept of marriage. And you want this? With me? For the first time since he'd known her, the formidable Commander Zalith Vren looked uncertain. I must confess, the law may have created this opportunity, but my interest in you began before the rescue. Mason's heart hammered against his ribs. What do you mean? From your first day aboard this ship, I found myself drawn to you. Your compassion toward all crew members regardless of species, your quiet competence, the way you face danger with calm courage. She paused, color rising in her pale purple cheeks. I have commanded for 15 cycles, and never has anyone affected me as you do. I've been attracted to you too, Mason admitted, the words rushing out. But I thought it was just intimidation mixed with, well, you're incredibly beautiful. Beauty is temporary, she said softly. But what I sense in you, what drew me before the law intervened, that runs much deeper. The space between them seemed charged with possibility, and Mason found himself leaning forward. Show me what this bond means. The observation deck was nearly empty during the night shift, just Mason and Zalith standing before the massive viewport watching distant nebulae paint the darkness in brilliant colors. For days had passed since the revelation, and they'd spent each evening together, carefully exploring the growing connection between them. On my homeworld, we have a saying, Zalith said, her voice soft in the quiet space. Kethera null vashan, the heart knows before the mind accepts. And what does your heart know? Mason asked, turning to face her. She met his gaze, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. That you are extraordinary, Mason Hale. Not because of your heroism, but because of your character. The way you helped engineer Clax with his homesickness yesterday, how you always volunteer for the dangerous assignments, your respect for traditions you don't understand. Mason stepped closer, close enough to see the subtle patterns in her pale purple skin. I've been reading about your culture's bonding rituals. The mental connection, the shared consciousness, it's beautiful, but terrifying. Why terrifying? Because I'm falling for you, he admitted. Not because of some ancient law, but because of who you are. The brilliant commander who shows mercy to defeated enemies. The woman who sits with injured crew members during their recovery. The person who hides her own loneliness behind duty and strength. Zalitha's breath caught. You see me clearly. I want to see more. Mason reached up to cup her face, marveling at the warmth of her skin. I want to understand what it means to bond with you. The process begins with synchronization, she whispered, placing her palm against his chest over his heart. We align our life rhythms, share breath and pulse until we can sense each other's emotions. Mason covered her hand with his, feeling the rapid flutter of her heartbeat. I can feel your nervousness. And I can feel your desire, she replied, her voice barely audible. The connection between them seemed to intensify, and Mason found himself leaning closer until their lips were almost touching. Zalith. Kiss me, she breathed. Their mouths met in a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent. Mason lost himself in the taste of her, the way she pressed against him, the soft sound she made as his hands tangled in her dark curls. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Your quarters or mine? He asked, his voice rough with need. Mine, she said, taking his hand and leading him through the ship's corridors. Her quarters felt different in the low lighting, more intimate, more personal. Zaelith moved to dim the bioluminescent panels until everything was bathed in a warm, purple glow that made her skin seem to shimmer. Are you certain? She asked, her hands moving to the fastenings of her uniform. Once we begin the bonding process, there's no returning to what we were before. I don't want to go back, Mason said, beginning to remove his own uniform. I want to move forward, with you. Their coming together was a revelation. Every touch sent waves of sensation through the growing bond between them, amplifying pleasure until Mason could no longer tell where his feelings ended and hers began. Zaelith was both tender and fierce, guiding him through the intricacies of her species' intimate rituals while surrendering completely to the passion building between them. As they lay entwined afterward, skin to skin in the soft glow of her quarters, Mason felt something fundamental shift inside him. He could sense Zaelith's contentment, her growing love, the way she felt complete in his arms. I can feel everything, he whispered in wonder. As can I, she replied, tracing patterns on his chest. Your peace, your happiness, your certainty about us. I don't need 7 days, Mason said, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. I choose the bond. I choose you. Not because of law or duty, but because I love you. Her smile was radiant. And I love you, Mason Hale. My heart chose you long before fate intervened. The battle alarm shattered the peaceful quiet of the early morning shift. Mason jolted awake in Zaelith's bed, instantly alert as emergency lighting painted everything in urgent red. Beside him, Zaelith was already moving with military precision, reaching for her uniform. All hands to battle stations, came the ship-wide announcement. Unknown vessels approaching, hostile intent confirmed. As Mason dressed quickly, he felt something extraordinary happening. Through their deepening bond, he could sense Zaelith's tactical mind at work, threat assessments, crew positioning, weapons optimization. It was like having a master strategist's instincts flowing directly into his consciousness. Can you feel it too? Zaelith asked, her eyes wide with amazement as they rushed toward the bridge. Your battle awareness, Mason breathed. The way you're already planning 3 moves ahead. And I can feel your analytical mind processing technical solutions I never would have considered. She grasped his hand briefly. The bond is accelerating beyond all normal parameters. They reached the bridge to find controlled chaos. 5 enemy vessels had dropped out of hyperspace in a coordinated assault formation, their weapons already charging. Captain Dex was barking orders while bridge crew scrambled to respond. Commander, they're jamming our communications array, reported Lieutenant Torres from her station. We can't call for Alliance backup. Mason found himself speaking before he'd consciously formed the thought. I can bypass their jamming, but someone needs to manually recalibrate the external communication relays. It would require EVA access to the hull-mounted equipment. That's suicide, Dex growled. Those relays are completely exposed to enemy fire. Not if we coordinate properly, Zaelith said, her mind melding with Mason's to form a plan neither could have conceived alone. If I can draw their attention with a focused assault on their lead vessel, Mason could reach the relays during the distraction. It's too dangerous, Mason protested, even as he felt Zaelith's absolute confidence in his abilities flowing through their bond. Together, she said simply, and Mason understood. They would succeed or fail as one. The next 30 minutes were a masterclass in synchronized action. Mason worked on the hull with mechanical precision, his movements guided by tactical instincts that weren't entirely his own, while Zaelith's technical insights flowed through their connection to enhance her combat strategies. When enemy fire came perilously close to his position, Mason moved with reflexes that seemed to anticipate the attacks before they occurred. Through their bond, he felt Zaelith's unwavering faith in him, her love giving him strength beyond his normal capabilities. Communications restored, Mason announced as the final relay clicked into place. All channels clear. Within minutes, Alliance reinforcements were jumping into the system. The enemy vessels, realizing they were outmatched, attempted to retreat, but the combined fleet made short work of them. As the all-clear sounded, Mason and Zalith found themselves alone in the communications bay, both breathing heavily from adrenaline and the intensity of their shared experience. "That was incredible," Mason said, pulling her into his arms. "The way our minds worked together, the way I could feel your confidence even when I doubted myself." "You saved everyone," Zalith replied, her voice filled with pride and love. "Not because of duty or ancient laws, but because of who you are." Mason cupped her face in his hands, seeing his own emotions reflected in her dark eyes. "I don't care about the treaty anymore, Zalith. I don't care about the political implications or the ancient traditions. I choose you. Not because I have to, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible." Her smile was luminous. "And I choose you, Mason Hale. My heart chose you long before any law intervened." Their kiss was deep and passionate, sealing not just their bond but their freely given commitment to each other. Around them, the ship hummed with renewed life, carrying them toward a future where love had conquered law, where two souls had discovered in each other not just a partner, but perfect completion. As they held each other close, Mason marveled at how the most terrifying assignment of his life had led to the most beautiful destination. Commander Zalith Vran, his commander, his bondmate, his love, had been worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Sometimes fate knew exactly what it was doing, even when it disguised destiny as duty.